together people that have got an interest in in this new legislation that's come out. And what I'm doing is bringing together some people that I've met over the last couple of years who have also got an interest in it as well. So the principle is that we can share some experiences, yeah, and also then use this to identify ways that we may be able to tackle what I think is a significant challenge for, in particular, for social landlords, and obviously their residents. I mean, they're the most important people to look at from this perspective. So that's the reason for bringing everybody together. Alex and I have been talking about this for the last few weeks, and there's, I think most client organisations are looking at this very actively and have been doing for probably the last 18 months or so, I imagine. And what I'm trying to do here is see if we can bring together the best thinking, and then we can share better ways of doing things. I think the other thing that we've learned through the whole BIM for housing, BIM in asset management, and also the golden thread work is that if we can get more standardization in terms of processes and data sets and things like that, then people stand a much better chance of complying, in particular supply chain members. So one of the things I would like to do, I don't know if we've got anybody on here today that's a contractor who would actually be asked to do the work, but if you know of somebody that either, you know, Vic, for example, from Wythenshawe, if you've got contractors that you would be using to carry out this work, I think it would be helpful if we could start to bring those into the discussion as well. So if you know of somebody that's a contractor that is competent and able to do the work, in particular the mold work, I'd like to, if you could put their name in the chat or the company name or something like that, we can invite them. Okay, so I think possibly, is it worth people going around the table and just giving a 1-minute explanation as to what you do and also what your interest is in this? Could I ask maybe Stephen Wesley first of all? Would you mind, Stephen, just giving us a?
Yeah, no problem. Thanks, George. So yeah, 2 years ago, so a brief introduction. I'm Stephen from Iris IoT. We make sensors to monitor everything, you know, from predictive maintenance to oil pipelines, chicken sheds. We monitor everything, and we saw, if we're honest, we'd started looking at Awaab's law about 2.5 years ago as a business opportunity. So knowing nothing about mold 2 years ago, we went in pretty blind and spent 2 years talking to housing associations, doing a lot of shows, doing a lot of events, mold specialists, expert witnesses, all these kind of people involved, and realized quite quickly that mold is a massive issue for everybody involved. You know, we do know from Awaab's law that it does kill people, and there are more cases to come through. We'll see that in the next 6 months of housing associations, local authorities, either going through the courts or getting some substantial fines. But what you find is there's a lot of misinformation. So we've spoke to a lot of specialists, and it's not for me to say, but yeah, there is a lot of bad information about mold, and everyone's got an opinion around mold. But you know, it does kill people. It's very hazardous, and there are different ways of looking how to rectify the problem. Previously, before the law come in, you know, there was a big focus on the tenants' behaviour, how they live their lifestyles, but that's changing dramatically on how landlords are now having to engage with the tenants, because let's be honest, there's some substantial fines hanging over their heads if they don't comply. So yeah, is that okay, George? Quick overview.
That's brilliant. Thank you, Steve.
Okay, thanks, George.
Yeah. So Vic, could you give your perspective, please?
Hi, can you hear me okay?
Yeah,
Yeah,
perfectly.
I'm having problems with my camera, sorry, so I can't get it on. I don't know why. Yeah, so we've been having a look at it also for a couple of years, since Awaab's event happened. And we're looking at our day-to-day surveyors and how we can get a team together to specifically look at these areas, which we've been doing. I myself, from a surveying background, and did used to do damp and mold and structural surveys quite some time ago, so got an interest in it anyway. And now as I'm a building safety manager, it obviously comes under the Building Safety Act to some degree as well, because obviously severe damp and mold issues can cause a lot of structural problems as well. So we're making sure that we're linking up across the board here with our surveying teams, our repairs teams, and the building safety team. So yeah, I think from my perspective, it's just really important we link it up, like we've said with building safety in Grenfell. You know, there was people are working in isolation, so we've got to make sure that we work together on these things as well. So that's where my my interests lie at the moment.
Brilliant. Thanks, Vic. I mean, one of the interesting things, Vic's from Wythenshawe, and she's a very active member of our BIM for Housing and BIM and Asset Management group. And she's been using 360 photography for what they do. And I'd like to suggest that has got a role to play in this as well. But that's my particular interest. Afam from Enfield, could you just explain what you do? Okay, Afam's got a note taker going, so he might have popped away. How about Dan from Winchester?
Hello.
Hi, Dan.
Yeah. Yes, I'm a graduate building surveyor at Winchester City Council. So we're dealing with the the housing stock, and obviously Awaab law might have a huge impact on how we go about our responsive repairs and in turn planned maintenance.
Okay, thanks, Dan. Connor, are you there? There's always a danger when I ask. Hi, Connor.
Yeah, I'm there. So there seems to be a theme. I'm also one of the building surveyors for Wheatley Housing Association in up in Scotland. Whilst we don't have, whilst Awaab's law won't directly apply to Scotland, Scottish Government is taking it seriously and putting it into their own building standards. Obviously, it's a huge thing. Damp mold is a huge thing. So like to see what everybody else's thoughts and feelings are on it. Obviously, in our previous role, we had a few ideas of how we might tackle things and look at things.
Brilliant. Thanks, Connor. Catherine Scott. Catherine, are you there?
Sorry, hiya, just trying to find the unmute button. Hiya, I'm Kat, I'm from IoT Solutions Group. So we, much like Stephen, provide monitoring sensors for a wide variety of things, and damp and mould being absolutely the key focus for us in light of Awaab's law and all the legislation that brings.
Brilliant, thank you. Simon Collery. Simon, are you there? I'll move on to Andy Cumberpatch. Andy.
Yeah, morning all. It's more just to find out more about it. We work in social housing. I don't think it's going to impact us currently, but I know with the future, Awaab's law will be rolling out of the other bits that come with it.
Yeah, actually, Elspeth can probably give us a bit of a steer on that, because she told me on Monday or last week that I didn't realise this, that it was it's not just damp and mould, it's also fire and electrical safety as well. So
yeah, that's correct. That going forward, that's what's going to come in. Yeah, so I'm just trying to get on board now to glean the information to see how it will impact us at FCS going forward.
yeah, good. Okay, thank you. Nick Davis.
Yeah, hi, Nick Davis. I head up the commercial team of IT Solutions. Kat just mentioned a moment ago. I'm in the fortunate position, I suppose, that I've headed up the commercial teams at two different IoT providers, so 90 here, but also Switchy. So over the last 5 or 6 years, I've had really great experience of working with different housing providers across the UK, so that's England, Wales, and Scotland, and working with partnerships, whether it's the likes of Total Mobile all the way through to main contractors as well, to really get a grip of and understand the challenges that damper mold bring and the causality of damper mold, and not just the compliance of Awaab's law. But the interesting thing about Awaab's law, all it really does actually is it cements the response times, but it does a little bit more than that. It obviously puts a different onus and responsibility on the landlords to actually understand a little bit more around causality, and also ensuring that any interventions, any fixes, validating that they've worked. So it's kind of triangulating, really, I suppose, how we can use technology to do that at scale, drive those efficiencies, and really validate the impact ultimately we're going to have on your residents. And I think that's often overlooked. Yes, there's a cost to the asset, but there's an impact of the asset on the resident and a corresponding impact of the resident on the asset itself. And it's how do we kind of help break that cycle and understand really what's going on.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Nick. Aaron from America, thank you for joining us. I think you've had to be at an unearthly hour, but good morning. Good afternoon.
Yeah, good morning. No, it's 3 a.m. here, but I'm happy to be here and learn a little bit more about this. I do Apex Consulting, so I work with portfolio managers working with their automation systems, space cooling and heating, process cooling and heating, and those kinds of things. That's the portion that's applicable to this today. So I'm looking forward to hear what you guys have to say.
Brilliant. Thank you very much, Aaron. Dan O'Gorman.
Good morning, everyone. Dan here. I'm from GS1 Ireland. Obviously very interested in this because mold is not just confined to the UK, it's a global phenomenon. What I'm interested in is how we can actually prevent this from the first place happening and ensure that the inspections that were carried out during the construction and operation of these buildings are compliant using the GS1 standards, i.e. the tags at that location. And then finally then to ensure that the materials used are compliant with the specification going forward, because I assume out of this will become an avoidance strategy rather than a rehabilitation strategy across the board.
Definitely.
Thank you.
Justin Gillard.
Morning, everybody. Yeah, I'm here as a BIM consultant. I usually work with asset owners. My interest in the subject is alongside George in many ways to facilitate these processes really where required on the design and fit out side of things is where I tend to operate.
Thank you very much, Justin. Mark. Are you there, Mark? Okay.
He's put a comment into chat. He's got no audio or video, but he's in chat if you want to read about Mark.
Brilliant. Okay, that's fantastic. Thank you, Alex. You, as ever, you're on top of things. Taylor Hammond, what do you think you've got to contribute? We can't hear you, Taylor. Okay, we'll catch up with you later. James King.
Hi, I'm a knowledge development lawyer at Devonshire Solicitors. So my role is to stay on top of all the new developing stuff and do internal training for Devonshire's and then also external for clients as well. I suppose my primary interest in joining this group was to see how it's being put into practice into things like maintenance contracts and how it's being drafted to take into account like the obviously there's the short timelines, but how is the risk apportioned, especially where things like for example the person in the maintenance contract isn't doing the triaging of the calls. So how are people effectively taking into account things like 24-hour timelines and then putting it into their contracts. So it's
brilliant. Thank you, James. Norma Supernormal. I never quite know now whether that's a person.
I think that's an AI note taker.
Is it? Right, okay. And Elspeth.
That says note
Hi
taker.
there. Nice to meet you all. Elspeth Grant, founding director of AAA Solutions. We initially started by looking at Part M. In the crazy hazy days when Part M access into buildings by disabled and vulnerable people came in. In 2007, I was the director of an RMO, and the fire safety order suddenly landed in our email boxes. Even in those days, we had emails. Took legal advice. The fact that it was a personal responsibility did not go down well with the other directors of the RMO. Since 2009 to date, I've been involved in developing instructor-led training, strategies for residential estate managers, for evacuation PEEPs. And since 2019, moved all our training, role-based training, over 20 hours of IFE accredited training onto e-learning, and currently work with organisations to make sure that they have suitable and sufficient training. And we've just updated all our courses with, guess what, Awaab's law. It's very easy to forget. It covers fire and electrical hazards as emergency hazards, which are in force now. That's me in a nutshell.
Brilliant. That's fantastic. I think we've got a great group, and I'm now going to ask Alex to just explain what he's doing. Have I missed anybody else before I hand over to Alex?
Can you hear me now?
Oh, I can now. Yes. Carry on, Taylor.
Okay, so this is Taylor. Sorry about that. Yeah, I'm Taylor Hammond. So I've founded something called the National Building Register just last year, actually, but after decades of angst. It's a digital repository for the golden thread in its sort of early sense, but I'm hoping it will be somewhere that property owners will want to keep their property records indefinitely. But that's only part of what I do. I'm also a retrofit coordinator, a project manager in construction, and a principal designer for building regulations as my day jobs. So I see at the coalface things that are going on, shouldn't be going on, defects that we uncover and highlight and have to deal with. So really, to try and pull all this together, I'm about due diligence and due process and making sure that when work is carried out, it is done according to the design and specification, and that the products are correct. They've got the correct certification, and that's keep everything as it should be.
Yeah. So if I just before I hand over to Alex, what I'd like to just what you've done there is just prompted one of the main reasons I see this as being so important as far as the golden thread is concerned. And that is that what we've learned over the last 4 or 5 years and working with it is that there are so many different threads, all of which are important, but if they are treated in isolation with each other, then we don't achieve the overall objective. So from a fire safety point of view, for example, making sure that all of the elements that go to make up a compartment wall, they all need to perform, not just the fire doors, or the penetration seals. All of them have got to perform. And then if they don't perform, we've then got to make sure that also the smoke control system works, and also the alarm system, etc. Now, what's interesting for me with the in particular the damp and mold side of things is that it's complicated. There can be many different causes and reasons that's happening, both in terms of elements within the building that aren't working properly because they've either not been designed properly as you're saying there, Taylor, but also they've not been implemented properly, or that something's happened to damage them, to stop them from operating, and therefore I think that the process of sorting the problem out, rather than who's responsible, which is the worry I've got at the moment, everybody's going to be maybe turning to James and his colleagues at Devonshire's to say, who can we sue? The point is, what we need to do is have something where we can have a process in place where we can obviate the problem and make sure that it can actually be addressed. Because at the end of the day, that's what the objective of the thing surely is, to make sure that we can identify what the fault is, and also be the core information, rather than just having a sticking plaster on it. Alex, can I ask you to just reprise what you've done before? Yeah.
As he said, yeah, absolutely. Hi, so I'm Alex Oldman. I'm an asset management sales specialist at Total Mobile. I've been working in social housing, asset management for the last 20 or so years. Previously spent a lot of time with Civica. So in terms of what we're trying to provide at Total, is a solution for, so it's a data repository for people to hold their asset records, their property asset records in the system, and to be able to provide a automated process that can take data from, for example, automated alerts like IoTSG. Nick and Kat on the call here can push alerts into our system, which generates a task or activity within the system, which can then be allocated to an appropriately competent operative to go out and perform that investigation. Going back to the James's previous question about when the sort of SLAs actually start, it's at that initial report that the first SLA measure will be kicking in, and so we can then follow the progress of the investigation, the categorization of the problem, all the way through to follow-up remediation works and track those through contractors and delivery of those works, but then also reporting to the resident according to the service levels that have been provided. Then and so this is something that our customers are implementing now, and have implemented, in fact, are operating with now. So this is an established, simple process. I think what we need to work towards next is the levels where you can look at prediction and track trends that are emerging. So where this is going to be really helpful in the application of information technology into this is going to be where we can start to predict where we know that problems are going to be arising. So already it must be in place that we've got these complaint handling reports are being brought into the system, or initial reports in the process. But if you've deployed sensors into properties where there might be residents or households that are at risk, so if you've identified amongst your residents those that might be at risk from damp and mold, so those would be typically people with poorly health conditions, pulmonary conditions, those sorts of things, pulmonary diseases, I should say, then they're going to be more at risk of this. So you've got to watch those households much more carefully. So it would be appropriate to deploy sensors into those. It's also possible that you can do a higher cross-level portfolio analysis and identify assets or trends that are happening in the reports that are coming in based on the archetypes of properties. So there might be certain types of properties or areas of geography. You might have certain streets that have been built that are actually more susceptible to these damp reports or damp risk within the system. So you can then identify from that the households and the property types that you might want to target, and provide an enhanced service to those to try and preempt some of the matters. I think, George, we've previously spoken about an example of one of your customers, I think you spoke to, who had identified that there was when you've got an initial problem reported, damp and mold in a property in a block of flats, for example, they identified that it was potentially to do with the rainwater goods not draining properly, or it could have been the soil stack. But anyway, there was water moving through the building when it shouldn't have been on the wall on the outside. So then it was appropriate to look at the levels underneath and determine on the floor below, is there also going to be a damp problem here? Is there as yet unreported damp problem? And just a smarter way of looking at things. So going back to the role of the building safety manager in this case, that's obviously not going to cover the whole stock, because building safety managers are not appointed for every home, but only for the larger schemes. But a building safety manager would typically have really good insight into the building itself, the structure makeup and operation of that. So that can be a very, very, very valuable part of the process as part of the whole, what we're describing here as the bigger building safety scheme. So yeah, I don't know if that was too much of a sort of a picture and explainer really, but
I think that's very helpful, Alex. And I'll just probably declare my interest as well. So I think it's probably worth just saying that. So as active plan rather than BIM for housing or BIM in asset management, both of which are voluntary roles on my part, active plan's a BIM application, but not BIM in the way that most people would think of it. It's an information management ecosystem that can connect lots of things together. Now, what I'm interested in is seeing how we can contribute to the work that Alex is providing, and lots of other software vendors are providing in this area, because I don't think anybody's got anything like the solution. The other thing I would say is that as far as the example that Alex just gave there, it becomes very complex for the client organization to actually find the information that they need. So, for example, the drainage information probably wasn't, and it may have been provided in some documents that are in some O&M somewhere. It may have been modeled, but even if it is modeled, it's probably modeled as a work package and it doesn't relate to other information as well. So it actually does need to be glued together. So part of what I think that we can bring to the table is gluing together a lot of disparate information that would otherwise be missed. The other aspect of this is looking at what are the other financial drivers as far as social landlords are concerned, because the challenge is that everybody's been investing or throwing money at trying to solve problems with fire over the last many years, and I can imagine for social landlords the coffers are quite depleted from that perspective. Now, if we can do things where information that is being gathered for fire safety can also be used by people that are looking at things for electrical safety and also for damp and mold, we've got the same base information model that then can be repurposed in many different ways. And again, I won't. I think most people recognise that I'm a big believer in 360 photographs to be able to supplement any information that's either historic information or BIM models. So the 360 photograph, however it's taken, whether it's taken just using a simple camera or by one of the big reality capture vendors, that's enormously useful information. And I'd like to use this community to understand how we can glue together all these great bits of technology and also expertise to say, how can we come up with some reusable solutions? So that's where I'm coming from. So, Alex, if we were to try and draw this together into something where we can provide a way of articulating to landlords and also service providers, maintenance companies, what's actually needed. How do you think we might be able to look at what information we need? Because at the end of the day, this is BIM in asset management as a group. So, and that doesn't mean 3D, it means information. So one of the questions I've got is, what information do we actually need to help people solve problems?
Yeah, so I'm just going to share my screen if I may. I'm going to put a link in which people can click on into the chat, and then I'll share my screen as well. He says, I've just got to minimize everything I might have open in the background. Sorry, hang on a moment. Right, so I'm going to share this link, which is a link to the MHCLG's document on data standards and requirements. Now, just let me share my screen on this as well, so you can actually see the item I'm talking about. So this web page from a while back, from earlier on in this year, but was talking about evolving data standards for Awaab's law. In this particular case, in social housing. So obviously, Awaab's law is targeted at social housing, but all housing providers, private rented sector is equally applicable. I'd have thought, again. Perhaps James can help us out here on that point. But there's this discussion about the data model in terms of what information you might require. Now, what we haven't done, and I think would be useful to this particular forum and group, would be a mapping for an undertake as perhaps an individual as a group exercise to take a mapping of this and see how this might map across the building information that we've got already, particularly for this property map. This is actually suggesting that we need information from tenants, properties, appointments regarding the investigations and the work orders. And there's even a suggested entity relationship diagram for the data types that might be included, without getting too geeky and technical on the information provider side of things. And you'll find that there's links off to the hacked publication on this as well. So HACT are starting to work with the government on what the data standard, the data model might be. But I think we also need to think about how this might work in a BIM context. I'm always slightly conflicted thinking about BIM, because my role and my approach is more strategic portfolio thinking, whereas BIM tends to be specific projects, often a single building. It might be a larger scheme like a hospital, for example, that might include multiple buildings, but typically a single campus. Whereas I think we need to perhaps think about the data that we would want to collect across multiple, across an entire portfolio. And the last point I want to make on that is often the level of data that's collected, sort of BIM information that we might record, is held in much lower detail about residential assets that we've got. If you've got a 3-bedroom house that is being rented from a social landlord, you might only have information about the make and model of the boiler, for example, and associated information. So forgive me, my phone's ringing. So there's some thoughts there. So in terms of the data model, we need to hold information on the residents. So there needs to be some sort of CRM piece to actually implement this properly. We need to be able to capture information into the system. And then we need to identify that the mold is in place and then take appropriate action. When the action's finished, when the action's work has been completed, we need to make sure that we can certify or satisfy ourselves that the work has been completed to the required standards. And if you're making upgrades or changes, then that hasn't, you need to understand how that might have affected the safety management system for that building going forward. So the classic is you put a ventilation, you fit an extractor fan, but has that compromised some of the fire safety or compartmentation in that building now? Have you got a knock-on effect as a consequence of that action that you've taken to mitigating the risk here has actually introduced another risk in another area? So again, this needs to be part of a whole building safety system, and all of that needs to be considered as part of the context. So
brilliant, Alex. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. So I don't know if anybody actually wants to think about or offer or volunteer to work on a mapping where we can look at the data standards that perhaps HACT are working on and look at an interpretation of that with a portfolio-based BIM approach. That would be certainly something that I would like to do as an exercise.
So just on that, if you're interested in that particular topic, either in contributing to it or learning what other experts are doing, just put data standards into the chat. Okay. Right. I'm going to open it up now to anybody that wants to contribute or has something to build upon what Alex has said there. If you just put your hand up, if you've got something to contribute.
George, can I just ask a question?
Please.
Just so is this a working group or a work stream?
Work stream.
Right. What is the purpose of the work stream in one sentence?
To come up with some repeatable, standardized methods of addressing the challenge that social housing providers have got. I think that's
so. It's about methodologies rather than the data itself.
I think it's the outcomes, which would be a combination of the process and the means of achieving the outcomes. I wouldn't want this just to be talking about process. I think
okay. I'm just trying to be clear about it. That's all.
Yeah, a part of what we're thinking with this is perhaps what we do is we look at what types of innovation are happening in the industry to actually tackle it, because we will have people that are coming up with some really, like Alex is already leading on with Total Mobile, and with the greatest respect, there's probably, some of your competitors like NEC are probably doing a similar type of thing. What I think would be great is if we could have examples of that, and maybe for teams to come together. This might sound a bit grand, but we could have an Awaab's Law challenge. So, in other words, asking people to form teams, maybe a social housing provider, or maybe one or two actually, getting together with maybe a couple of technology companies, somebody like either Iris or IoT Solutions, or indeed bringing in Aaron's technology as well, which is a lot of that's around ventilation rather than just sensors. So I think that's quite an interesting thing, because
would this be for existing people who are working together, or they would come together?
I think both.
But for both.
I suspect that there's probably clients are probably bringing together people to address a particular problem, but there may well be an opportunity to bring together people that could also contribute to that as well. So I don't know. I mean, it's not a matter.
So would there be prizes?
I think so. I think we can do that. Yeah. So I don't know. Richard. I'm just saying at the moment.
No, I'm just thinking it's because that sounds like quite a good idea to me. But it's nice to have prizes.
Yeah. Okay. Well, let's see. Does anybody like the idea of having a challenge? If some sort of competition on that. If you're interested in maybe forming a group, just put challenge into the chat, and we'll. I'm really looking probably for Alex to help coordinate some of this if you've got the time to do it.
Yeah. Can I just say Connor's got his hand up. So Connor, if you'd like to speak, fire away.
Apologies, sorry.
I was just letting the boys talk that one out. Mine's sort of more poses a question that might help start some conversations. I suppose firstly, been trying to find solutions for Awaab's law since I was in my last job. That was pretty much the introduction of Awaab's law is what started the last company I was at. That's what started the business. Internally at Wheatley, with me moving into the department that I'm in now, we are building, and we're at the very start of building a full portfolio of, at least in the meantime, 2D twins. So that fits into your portfolio of information. But it's maybe one for it is one for the IoT guys. What we found was, particularly housing association at the scale of Wheatley, where there's 65,000 houses, and that's growing every year, plus another 30 odd that are factored. There's 90,000 houses. What we found with the IoT sensors is everything was red. Absolutely everything was red. There was no form of exceptions reporting. So all you had was somebody was logging into this dashboard and saying, "Oh, the humidity is high everywhere. You're at damp and mold risk here. You're at dust mite risk here. Everything's red," and there was no. I don't know if it's possible. There was no data saying that this property matches with this construction type, which means this is your priority. And I think one of the problems with putting things into archetypes is that unless you're including construction type, because I've got, I mean, just in the south side of Glasgow, I've got 15 different construction types of tenement buildings that are all the same archetype. So it's trying to match up what the sensors are actually telling without it just saying, "Oh, this is every single building has got mold in it," or "every single building's at mold risk." Because I mean, with the cost of living, everything is at mold risk. So just be maybe the IoT guys can jump in and say, "Well, how do we make it easier for the RSLs and the social landlords to actually use the information that's being provided by the IoTs?"
Nick?
Yeah, look, that's really valuable feedback, and I'll be really candid. There are some of us better at this than others, right? So first and foremost, if the IoT sensors all they're doing is telling you about absolute moisture and humidity, then it's no surprise that you can have bread across the board. What you need to make sure you do is you're working with the right kind of partners that have the right accuracy of the algorithms, and those algorithms are tested, because some of the benefit and some of the value of IoT sensor technology is to drive efficiency, but it's not going to be efficient if we're going to tell you everywhere is littered with damp and mold. And I'm not going to go into a pitch, but like I say, some do it better than others. So that's the first thing. The second thing is, even where those that do it well and have high accuracy in the algorithms, the important piece here is then the integration of those insights. Now, what IoT providers will provide you are actionable insights. You kind of need to do something with it, but we only give you part of the picture. And that's where the partnership, that's where the integration, that's where working with others out there and making sure that insight goes into your systems of engagement and your systems of record. You called a couple of those out already. Okay, great. You give me this picture about what's going on in this property, but what's the archetype? Okay, there you go. Let's enhance that. Let's push it into your asset management system so you get a picture about the archetype. But interestingly, one of the things you've missed out is triangulating the resident. Now, you may have a whole street full of exactly the same archetypes, and you have all sorts of different risk metrics that are coming out of those same archetypes, because you've got different residents that are living in those archetypes. Some residents may well be in real extreme fuel poverty and are unable to heat their home. That's going to have an impact. Some residents might be a single person, some might be a family of 5. Okay, these are completely different environments that are happening in the same place. And some of those residents might also be vulnerable residents. They may be elderly, they may be children under 5, which is quite important when it comes to Awaab law. You're going to have that information in your housing management system. So this isn't just about IoT sensors and their accuracy and understanding what's going on environmentally. It's understanding the building. It's also understanding the people in there and how these things all join up. Yeah, and that's where we have to work in partnership and work collectively.
I think you're absolutely right. I do actually have it in my notes about people affecting it. I was really going to lead into that in a separate one. So in the last place I worked, we wanted to sort of create or investigate in partnership with Napier University, but that's now gone, is looking at people as a dimension of BIM. Because all the BIM stuff at the moment it's all about the building really, and whether it's a hospital or a 2-bed flat, people are the ones that actually use this building. So what is their impact on the building? So that you're absolutely right. Completely agree. As any people from the RSLs in this call know, you've got some 2-beds that have got 4 people in them that need additional ventilation or some kind of thing done it, and then you've got other 2-beds where there's 1 person in it, and they don't need it. Or you've got 1 person that has 2-hour-long steaming hot showers, and the 4-bed folk keep the windows open all day. But it's having that sort of BIM people dimension of BIM would be really good. But we never got to a place where we could publish anything that had any sort of substance to it.
Well, I had a really interesting conversation at a similar event to this last week with the housing ombudsman. He actually heads up the for England, and he heads up the disputes team. And more often than not, he's looking at the reports that come from surveyors, and it's ended up on a dispute. And the problem and the challenge, as professional as people are trying to be, often it's opinion. And one of the big things that Awaab's law talks about, it's a fact base. It's got to be data driven, rather than opinions. So what's the real data about what's going on in the property? Because too often, lifestyle. Well, guess what? We all live in we all live in home. We all take showers. We all dry our washing. We live in a northern hemisphere. It rains 90% of the time in autumn and winter. Where are we going to dry our clothes? Okay, that's the reality of life.
Sorry, I said that in one of the calls yesterday, not yesterday, last week, is that the building standards in Scotland actually state that you should have capacity to dry your homes internally, and that seems to go missing.
Yeah, and it's absolutely right to do that. But what's the data? What's really going on in that property to cause it to have a high risk of damp, which may lead to a high risk of mold occurring, and what's the data set that sits behind it? If you've already gone out, you've done some work, you've done some interventions, are you validated? Has it worked in the real world? Not in a model, but in the real world with the residents that you've got, and where's your evidence pack that sits behind yes or no? And if the answer is no, why not? What's the evidence that sits behind it? And I think got to have this blend of technology, people, systems and processes, but then bringing those different silos of data together to formulate that picture, so you can kind of make a difference to the lifestyle of the life of the resident.
So that seems to me to be another area that we could have a separate conversation on, Nick, which is as Colin's saying there, the bringing together of these different bits, as it were. I'm not quite sure how to articulate that, but if that's something that would interest you, maybe, I don't know what's the term. I mean, maybe that's golden thread. If you're interested in that, and maybe as setting up a conversation around that, put that in the chat, golden thread, and we can invite you to it. I had a call last night from a client, and I have to attend a meeting, a workshop for them with them. They've just won a new contract and they need some help. So I'm going to have to dip out at 12 o'clock. So I'm just making in advance my apologies for the fact, but I know that Richard and Alex can carry it forward. But I just want to apologise first of all for that. Dan.
Yeah, I was just going to say, again, we're told you can't sort of consider the sort of a person's impact, a human impact on mold, and got to think of it as a more the building rather than just the person having a shower because, well, obviously they have to. However, what we do get is we'll install extraction fans that are, set with a humidistat, so that we're all sort of working fine. But even when we don't even have a switch, some tenants are taking the fuses out so that they're not working because they don't want the noise and this sort of thing. And sort of where would we sort of stand in, especially with sort of Internet of Things and all of that, of getting all this data when potentially the end user is turning it off, and clearly the data will be wrong.
Yeah, the interesting thing with that, Dan, is that when we were doing the fire work years ago, I remember somebody from L&Q was talking about the condoms, and I thought, where do condoms fit in fire safety? And apparently, naive as I am, people were putting condoms over smoke alarms so that they could smoke, and then leaving the condoms on. Anyway, sorry, Nick.
It's a really good point. It breaks down to a couple of different areas, and we see it all the time. Now, the first piece is that why is the resident turning it off, right? And it's normally for one of two reasons we find. The first one is there's a perception it's costing them money, right? It's electric that's burning, and they're probably already fuel poverty, and so okay, that's one kind of education piece. The second piece is sometimes the fans are blimmin' noisy and actually quite disruptive. Now, if that's the case, then the argument would be, was it the right fan to begin with if it's that disruptive to the noise environment of the residents? So sometimes you need to scratch beneath the surface of it. But in a purely kind of legal protection perspective, if the IoT sensors are evidencing that you've done everything you can as a landlord to mitigate the challenges and issues in that property, and the data, not opinion, but the data is showing that the resident has turned off those measures, then you've got your data pack. You are protected, and you can show that. You can mitigate any future disrepair claim or any referral to the ombudsman, and you're protected. Now, it doesn't protect your asset from degrading from future damp and mold, but nevertheless, you've got the data set then to put your position across, and then it becomes an education piece.
Excellent, Aaron.
But Nixon is right on the money. The IoT sensors, it's perceived that it's a negative because it can be disabled, but it's actually a positive because you can tell that it was disabled. Also, I've worked with systems in places where the automation systems will give you 3,000 to 5,000 alarms a day. And what you're seeing is an indication of the people side of the IoT ecosystem, that it's not being implemented properly, that the people behind it are not doing their job properly. So you've got an indication, if you have alarms everywhere, back to the original comment, it's because it hasn't been done properly and it's not being managed properly by your vendor. So you've test driven your vendor successfully, and you've seen a demonstration of their lack of capability, and it's time to move on to another vendor, very likely.
Thank you, Aaron. One of the interesting things, I think, as far as the sensors are concerned, is that, and I'm learning about this. I've met Aaron virtually on a WhatsApp group that I've been invited to join, called Start with Smart, which is quite an interesting group. But the one of the fascinating things for me is that there are so many different technologies now with different providers that are doing different things. And I don't think any one IoT company is likely, even if they can do everything, it's unlikely that a particular landlord will have everything from one organization, because in many cases it will have been put in by maybe even a specialist subcontractor who's monitoring things. So what's absolutely critical is this ability to glue things together. And I think, part of I think that's part of what you do, isn't it, Aaron, to provide that type of integration. So yeah. Okay. Anybody else got any contributions? I can't see everybody's. side of things. Anybody else? Right. I'm going to need to jump out, but I'm suggesting that we have a follow-up meeting in a couple of weeks' time, which is the Thursday, what date is it? Thursday the 27th.
27th, yeah.
Yeah. Now, we had another workshop like this on fire strategies on Monday, and we've got a follow up on that one on the 24th. Now, the reason I'm mentioning that is that it has significance, I think, as far as building the right data set to manage this as well, because to achieve that, to do the fire strategies, they've got to have some sort of spatial model that identifies what spaces are being used for, and where they are, what the relationship of those spaces are, what those measures are in place, and particularly, as Elspeth told me, that fire safety and electrical safety are part of this as well. It even more feeds into it. And what was interesting on that is that the fire strategy people, the fire engineers, they're doing the fire side of things, looking at escape strategies. But we also had in that group the people that are responsible for security. And what they're doing is stopping people from getting into the building. Yeah. And what they're finding is that the people that are putting the measures in to stop people getting into the building, maglocks and things like that, are actually compromising the escape strategy. And it's only when you see those things together, then you identify what the conflicts are. So I'd like you to and ventilation's another part of that, by the way, because the ventilation in that particular case is smoke control. So being able to make sure that the right smoke control measures are in place. Now, if we think that ventilation, well, we know that ventilation is an important part of the damp and mold thing. It's another part of the jigsaw that we can perhaps join up. So if you're interested in, I'm not saying that you should necessarily get into the fire strategy group. You're welcome to join it if you wish. But if you want to know what was discussed there, if you just put fire strategy in the chat, we can send you a link to the recording. And I think, Richard, we're also doing a high level AI version of that, are we? AI summary.
I think more rather than a link to the recording, we do an AI generated 15-minute podcast.
Great.
Which would tell you all you need to know from that, and you can listen to it when you're driving or something. That probably makes the most sense, George.
Okay, good. Right, I'll leave you to it, and Alex, perhaps you can help come up with some outcomes. I hope it's been helpful. Thank you.
Thanks,
George. Cheers, Ryan.
Cheers.
Okay, so assuming that we've exhausted everybody's additional points that anybody wants to make, let's talk about sort of next steps and draw this to a close to a certain extent. So I see that we've got some responses to the challenge and the data standards side of things. So we'll take those away and have a discussion about how we can coordinate those. I'll be in touch with those people who've indicated that they want to be involved in those to work out what we need to be doing. I'm assuming that the BIM for Housing will be sending out the meeting invites for the 26th. I apologise, sorry, 27th. I apologise in advance. I probably won't be able to make that meeting. I've got an all-day event that I'm also running that day, but that's just by the by. I can play catch up and provide some prompts beforehand. In terms, does anybody have anything else that they want to pick up on or discuss? Or Richard, have you got any more coordinating comments you want to make?
I just wanted to add just quickly on the challenge, if that's all right. I know you've parked that, but do you mind if I?
No, that's fine. No, let's carry on. Yeah, let's go.
As I said, we're looking at having prizes for that. we've had suggestions so far of a 360 camera plus tuition, so you can make the most out of it, and various software vendors giving free, just free licenses for different bits of their software. If anybody's got any ideas as to what sort of prizes would be good and realistic, that would be really good to hear.
Yeah, I guess it would be good if your organisation's happy to donate a prize. That would be the
yeah, that would be really good.
challenge. Yeah.
Also, if you could put in the chat whether which you personally, if you get involved in this, would prefer. Would you prefer a 360 camera? Would you prefer software or both? So put 360, software or both, and then we can take that under advisement. Okay, thanks.
Okay, right. Well, that sounds very good. This is your final opportunity to pop your comments into the chat now before we wrap up and close the meeting, I guess. So looking forward to catching up with you, those of you who are indicating in the next couple of weeks. And thanks very much for your attention and input. I think this has been a particularly engaging session today, so thank you very much indeed. And hopefully next time when we get back together, Justin, I see your hands up. Next time we get back together, we'll be able to summarise and report some progress. Over to Justin for final comments.
So Alex, yeah, just a minor revelation in this meeting, really. I mean, I think it was you that said people as a dimension of BIM. Is that right? Somebody said it.
May not.
I think it might have been Nick. I think it was Nick.
That was me.
That was Connor from Wheatley. Yes.
Yeah, I find that fascinating because I come from an asset management background. I realised with a shorter time, and everything's focused on the asset. And with regards to Awaab's law and the occupant, of course, people aren't assets as such, but they do affect this subject. And I find it fascinating. I've gone through in the UK. We've got this NBS National Building reference here, and 8D BIM is 8D BIM is considered to be by some adding health and safety information, and I guess that's the nearest at the moment we come to that in the UK. You know, the human aspect of buildings and information about assets and of course people in them. 8D, I think it's fascinating as a concept. That's all I was going to say.
Very good. Yeah, absolutely. There's tons to it. There's many dimensions to that. Perhaps we can explore that as well. But there's, in terms of expanding out on that data set, if you want to be part of that challenge, Justin, that would be great. And the data standards as well. That's definitely something we can explore. My brain is firing off thinking competencies as well as risks that householders might have. So operator competencies, contact information is really important to drive these processes. We've got to keep people informed. Got to get information from them, feedback, etc. So yeah, very valid point. That's a really nice wrapper. So thank you for that. Thank you everybody, especially Aaron, who's up at 3 o'clock in the morning for this. So that's hero level. That is. Thank you for your support from across the great pond, and thanks all for your time. Have a great lunchtime. See you later. Or breakfast.
Cheers, guys.
Bye bye.
Cheers. Bye.
Thanks, everybody.